Whenever that girl cries, she sheds tears of pure blue. The emperor was utterly shocked when he heard of this, all because 20 years ago, on his deathbed, the old Grand Master had left a prophecy. Marrying a woman who sheds blue tears as empress will guarantee 100 years of prosperity for the empire. Yet, for the sake of a dying old man's nonsense,
My husband, the emperor, actually stole my phoenix seal.
while I was away praying for blessings, he forged a decree in my name, requesting my own deposition. After I spent a year praying at the imperial mausoleum on the emperor's behalf, and finally returned, my phoenix seal was nowhere to be found. The chief of the imperial household department knelt before me. Your Majesty, 6 months ago, you submitted a petition requesting to abdicate your position. 3 days ago, His Majesty decreed the installation of a new empress, noble consort Yun Jingxian. She is the daughter of the Minister of Revenue, brought into the palace by the Empress Dowager because of her auspicious destiny. I only smiled and smoothed my robes, my voice incredibly calm. So, when do I yield my position? Replying to Your Majesty, the petition has already passed the review of the 6th Ministry. It will be announced to the entire world this afternoon. The grand coronation of the new Empress is set for tomorrow at noon. That night, His Majesty arrived under the moonlight. He handed me a token to leave the palace, with a look of deep grief. Wanlian, you are the only one in my heart. But the Imperial Bureau of Astronomy says her destiny will ensure the prosperity of our empire. You must understand the bigger picture. I understand, Your Majesty. I courtesied with perfect elegance. For the sake of the empire, and for the sake of the imperial bloodline, I should naturally step down and yield to someone more worthy. Surprise flashed through Jia Jinham's eyes. He probably never expected me to be so compliant. I am deeply comforted that you can think this way. He reached out to pat the back of my hand to reassure me, just like he used to, but I quietly took half a step back, avoiding his touch entirely. His hand froze awkwardly in midair. Wanlian, I know you feel wronged. You may take all the gold, silver, and valuables with you. I will not be stingy. Her Dowager Empress Majesty has arrived. Following the eunuch's loud announcement, an Empress Dowager, surrounded by a crowd of palace servants, stepped over the threshold of Chingal Palace. Wanlian, since you have already agreed to step down, then I shall speak plainly. Then, the Empress Dowager walked over to the main seat and sat down. Regarding those 120 chests of your Dao, think that filled the national treasury as soon as you entered the palace. Now, even though you are leaving, you may take all those gold and silver jewels with you. But that pure gold 9 Phoenix command token is now the very lifeline that keeps the treasury running. You must leave it behind. You want. I look at this mother and son, the most noble rulers of the great Liang dynasty, and only feel a sense of sheer absurdity. One is the man I have loved for 7 years and supported as my husband for 5 years. The other is my mother-in-law, whom I serve devotedly day and night, even tasting her medicines myself. Yet they are casting me out, and still they want to strip away my very last layer of skin.
Sha Shunhang stands beside the Empress Dowager.
His face twisted in mock agony. Wanlian, I do not want you to suffer. You may take all the gold and silver you wish. It is enough to guarantee you a lifetime of wealth. But the Julan token is vital to the empire. With the wars at our borders still raging and the imperial treasury empty, if you take the Julan token with you, you plunge this people of Great Liang into utter misery. Once again, they use the righteousness of the realm to pressure me. I slowly lift my head and reply with a smile. Your Majesty and her Empress Dowager are absolutely right. I reach my hand into my sleeve. This is the Julan token. I hold the token out on my palm. Since Your Majesty and the Empress Dowager desire it, then I shall hand it over.
乔君阳，各为中游。
He sips forward to grab it, but I flip my palm, pulling it out of his reach. However, I have 2 conditions.
What conditions?
As long as you hand over the token, I will guarantee you a life of comfort for the rest of your days. I ignore the Empress Dowager and keep my eyes fixed on Xiao Jinghao. I want a formal divorce agreement. Yao Xinkong recoils in shock. A divorce agreement? Wanlian, I do have feelings for you. I am only deposing you as Empress. I never intended to cast you out completely. I interrupt him. What I want is for us to go our separate ways, with nothing to do with each other from now on, both free to remarry as we please. And I point to the old matrons and maids outside the hall. I want to take all of the Chen family's loyal servants with me. Since I am leaving the palace, they must naturally leave with me. Hearing this, the Empress Dowager... thinking, hey, and here I thought it was some impossible condition. I grant it. To the Empress Dowager, anything else is utterly worthless compared to power and wealth. But Xia Jinghang keeps staring at me, as if trying to see if I am just acting out in anger. But you will have absolutely nothing left.
Wanlian, when's the separation decree signed?
You will truly no longer belong to me. I gently placed the Julan token on the mahogany desk. I thought to myself, isn't this exactly what you wanted? You wanted your throne secured, and you wanted your beautiful mistress in your arms. I am simply granting your wish. I am trading this nation-rivaling wealth for my freedom. This is a trade where Your Majesty has absolutely nothing to lose.
Jia Duxing looked at the token.
And then at the Empress Dowager's urging gaze. In the end, he wrote, "May our parting bring peace to both sides, and may we both find happiness in our own ways." As the final stroke of parting fell, he stamped it with the imperial jade seal. I quickly snatched the paper away, cooling dry,
Carefully folded it.
and tucked it deep inside my robes, close to my heart. Then, pointing to the token on the desk, I said, "It's yours now." Turned and walked toward my old servants kneeling on the floor. I personally helped up my nanny, Mother Wrong. "Let's go home."
要用心色给买个星。
He thought I would use the Juan token to blackmail him into not crowning a new empress. He thought I would beg him in tears not to abandon me, but I did nothing. Now, kneeling on the floor, I am packing up my old things. Compared to all that gold, silver, and jewelry, the only thing I actually care about is what's inside this camphor wood chest. Inside was my salvation. From before I got married. The bridal gown my mother embroidered with her own hands. And my hand stopped on a rosewood box. Inside was a double fish jade pendant. My mind was uncontrollably pulled back to that winter solstice 7 years ago. 7 years ago, the late emperor believed a false rumor and punished him by making him kneel in the snow at the ancestral temple for 3 days and 3 nights without a single drop of water passing his lips. I bribed the guards and risked my life to slip inside. When I found him, he was freezing to death with barely a breath left in him. Jinxing. I wept, unbuttoning my heavy cloak, trying to warm his frozen, stiff body with my own body heat. But the boy, who was usually so afraid of catching a cold, pressed down on my hand and tucked it inside his chest. His teeth were chattering. "Wanilin, don't cry. This freezing cold is nothing. Once I conquer the world, I will use this empire as your betrothal gift to ensure you never have to suffer a single speck of harsh wind or cold frost ever again." The vows he made back then. Every single word felt so incredibly real, and I believed him. I truly believed he would be my most indestructible shield, my sanctuary for the rest of my life, the husband to whom I could safely entrust my very life. Sling strongly of alcohol, she is jinxing. So stumbled his way into the room. He muttered, "Wan Lian, are you blaming me?" He dismissed all the attendants. With his eyes turning red, he choked out, "I had no choice. I was forced into this." He collapsed onto the daybed across from me and buried his face in his hands. His voice trembled with emotion. Mother threatened to take her own life, and the court ministers used the fate of the nation to pressure me. Noble consort Yoon is pregnant again, and the imperial astronomers say her child carries a blessed destiny. If I didn't do this, I wouldn't be able to keep my hold on the throne. He peeked through his fingers to gauge my reaction. Seeing me sitting there completely unmoved, he assumed I was furious. So he stepped forward, his voice filled with desperation. "Wan Lenian, you've always been the most understanding one. You can surely understand my difficult position, right? They're the only one in my heart. The Empress's throne is nothing but an empty title." As he spoke, he reached out to grab my hand, just like he always did. A wave of intense nausea surged up my throat. Instinctively, I recoiled, dodging him as if he were a venomous snake. Chashchin's hand froze awkwardly in midair. Most of the drunkenness in his eyes instantly vanished. He stared at me in disbelief. "Your Majesty, you are drunk," I said, my voice cold. I stood up, my expression completely indifferent, cast a glance at Li Yishu, signaling him to assist his master.
Shatishin was stunned.
His gaze fell upon the red sandalwood box. "Aren't you going to take this jade pendant with you?" In his mind, since I had kept this token of our love, it must mean I still had feelings for him. "There is no need," I replied, casually picking up a damp cloth to wipe my hands, as if I had just touched something absolutely filthy. "That jade pendant is a royal treasure. Since this lowly commoner is no longer part of the royal family, it would be highly improper for me to take it." Xia Jingshen's face instantly turned ashen. "Waligan, this is the token of my love for you. You said you'd cherish this with your life forever. What is this supposed to mean? Are you trying to draw a clear line between us? You must be joking, Your Majesty." I turned back around and continued packing. The divorce agreement has been signed, and the Mean Phoenix command token has been returned. From now on, you are the ruler, and I am a mere commoner. I wouldn't dare keep any imperial gifts, lest someone accuse me of stealing palace treasures in the future. Fine, very well.
Al Jiaxing gritted his teeth. "Since you don't want them,
Then throw them all away. I didn't care about them either." Today was the grand coronation of the new empress, and the day I, the deposed empress, would leave the palace. The old headmaid sent by the Empress Dowager held a ledger, cross-checking every single chest. Territories checking to make sure my family didn't take so much as a single thread from the palace. I paid them no mind, simply directing my old servants to load a few sealed camphorwood chests onto the carriage. "Oh, is my dear sister leaving already?" A seductive voice drifted over. It was Union Xian. Oh, I should call her Empress Yu now, flaunting her heavily pregnant belly. She walked in like a queen, surrounded by her court, supported by her maids. She was clad in a brilliant red phoenix robe and wore the 9 phoenix crown on her head, the very one that used to belong to me. She was smiling triumphantly, Zhao Jixing followed closely behind her, dressed in his bright yellow imperial robes, with a rather conflicted look in his eyes. Seeing me in plain linen clothes, without a single hairpin or piece of jewelry.
小精神固有。
Wanlan, why are you dressed so plainly? He seemed to feel a bit guilty. Didn't I give you plenty of yum brocade and fine jewelry? Why didn't you bring any of it with you? Indeed, sister. His Majesty was so good to you. The rewards he gave you could practically buy half the imperial city. If you leave them all behind, wouldn't that be throwing His Majesty's kindness back in his face? Anyone who didn't know the truth would think His Majesty mistreated you, dear sister. Her words sounded like friendly advice, but they were incredibly malicious. She was flaunting her triumph and reminding Yao Jingxing that I didn't appreciate his gifts at all. I stopped what I was doing. I turned around and cast a cold, indifferent glance over them. I shot a dismissive look at Yun Jingxian, then turned my eyes to Shai Dingxing. I stepped aside to clear the way. Behind me, rows of chests were neatly lined up inside the grand hall. Every single one of them was wide open, filled with exquisite yun silk and brilliant kingfisher feather headdresses. The pearls, the gems, they were all the treasures Yao Jingxing had bestowed upon me over the years. Your Majesty, my voice was clear and firm. These things were bestowed by Your Majesty upon the Empress of Dalian. Now that I am no longer your Empress, they should naturally be returned to their rightful owner, to be left for the one who truly needs them. As I spoke, I threw a pointed look at Yun Jingxian. The smile instantly froze on Yun Jingxian's face, and Shai Jing's expression turned incredibly dark. I was truly leaving with absolutely nothing to my name, except for a few chests of old books and paintings, my mother's relics, and my old music scores. I took nothing else with me. Sister, you truly are a woman of noble character, Yun Jingxian sneered, gritting her teeth. But once you walk out of here, sister, I'm afraid you'll never lay eyes on such luxury and wealth ever again. Don't you dare regret it. I simply smiled. Ignoring her, I shut the last chest. I walked to the very center of the hall, facing this Chingle Palace that had trapped me for 5 years. And looking at this towering, majestic imperial city, I slowly knelt down
小将军头好我霸用体。
and instinctively straightened his back. A flicker of anticipation flashed in his eyes. He thought I would break down in tears right now, begging him to let me stay. But this was neither a bow of subject to ruler, nor a bow of wife to husband. I folded my hands together, pressed my forehead to the ground, and performed a deeply solemn, formal bow. First bow, think bid farewell to the 5 years of my youth buried within these red walls. Second bow, think bid farewell to the innocence and stupidity that once made me bleed for this court. Third bow, I bid farewell to my past. From this moment on, our paths will never cross again. We have absolutely nothing to do with each other. The final bow is done, and I stand up. I brush the dust off my knees. My eyes clearer than they have ever been, with not a single shred of regret left in my heart. Your Majesty, Your Highness, take care. Giving a slight bow, I turn and walk away, without once looking back. My carriage is waiting just outside the palace gates. My servant steps forward to lift the curtain, reaching out to help me inside. Stop right there! A chaotic rush of footsteps echoes from the side alley. I pause, slightly. Without even turning around, I can tell it is Nanny Su, the head maid serving Yun Jingxian. Where are you going in such a rush? Nanny Su sneers, flanked by 4 burly eunuchs, but block my carriage, looking aggressive and hostile. I slowly turn around to face them. Nanny Nu, shouldn't you be in the Weiyang Palace serving your mistress? Why are you out here barking like a mad dog? Nanny Su's face instantly stiffens. Then she sneers. For a mere peasant, you sure have a big mouth, but the palace has rules. Not a single needle or thread belonging to the palace leaves this gate. Her eyes scan me up and down with utter contempt. She says in a dripping, sarcastic tone, Her Majesty the Empress suspects that someone is trying to smuggle imperial treasures out of the palace. And to uphold the palace laws, we must not only search your carriage, but we must search your body as well. The moment those words leave her mouth, the imperial guards at the gate pale in shock. A body search? Letting eunuchs and a maidservant strip search the former empress in broad daylight. This isn't a routine search. This is a deliberate public humiliation. Anti-Unit is shaking with pure rage. She leaps down from the carriage and fiercely shields me behind her. Though my lady is no longer the empress, she is still a first-class noble lady, personally titled by the late emperor himself. Who among you dares to touch her? A worthless old hag like you dares to bark at me? Men, teach this old dog a lesson about the palace rules. No sooner have the words left Nanny Su's mouth than 2 burly eunuchs lunge forward, slamming Auntie Yu down by her shoulders from both sides. What do you think you're doing? Let me go! Auntie Yun struggles desperately. Kneel down! One of the eunuchs keeps her heart in the back of her knees. Crack! Ah! Auntie Yun lets out a blood-curdling scream. She is violently forced to her knees in the freezing snow. Horrified, I try to rush forward, but the other 2 eunuchs block me, holding me back with an iron grip. Nanny Su pulls a heavy mahogany ruler from her sleeve. Since you don't know how to keep your dog on a leash, let this old servant teach her some manners on your behalf. This strike is her punishment for offending the imperial carriage. The heavy wooden ruler whipped ruthlessly across Aunt Yoon's face. The brutal blow sent Aunt Yoon stumbling to the side. Instantly, half of her cheek swelled up terribly. The blood from the corner of her mouth dripped onto the cold snow, staining it a piercing bright red. Auntie Won convulsed in agonizing pain. Slurring her words, she cried out to me, "My lady, don't worry about me. Go, quickly. Don't let yourself be humiliated for my sake. Right do you have to do this?" I demanded. When did Aunt Yoon ever offend the imperial carriage? Nanny Lee from the Empress Dowager's palace has already inspected every single chest. Are you saying the Empress Dowager's word means nothing to you? Nanny Sue flicked the droplets of blood off her ruler, giving me a deeply mocking glare. The Empress specifically reported this to the Empress Dowager. She sneered. This old servant is only acting on her sacred decree. So, Commoner Chun, there is no need to make a scene. You had better remember one thing. In this palace, the power lies with the Yuns now, not the Chens. If you cooperate and let us search you quietly, this old hag might suffer a few less blows. Otherwise... She raised the ruler high once more. "Nanny Sue!" I screamed, forcefully shoving aside the eunuchs holding me back, and lunged straight at her. "It seems you don't want this hand of yours anymore." A sharp gold hairpin was stabbed deep into Nanny Sue's palm, blood splattering all over the snow. "Since this hand of yours doesn't know any manners, I'll ruin it for you." In excruciating pain, Nanny Sue collapsed backward into the snow, rolling around and screaming in agony. The surrounding eunuchs and imperial guards were completely paralyzed by the sudden, brutal scene. Every single one of them stood frozen, not a single soul daring to step forward. "Jin Wan Lin, have you lost your mind?" A furious roar boomed from behind. Xiao Tuting stormed over with giant, furious strides. "Your Majesty!" Blood. There's so much blood. Trailing close behind, Yoon Jingsing clutched her stomach, collapsing weakly into Xiao Jingsing's arms. Sister. How could she be so ruthless to my nanny? Today of all days is the grand ceremony. Spilling blood today is a terrible sacrilege.
小景静是 face 同层平地着，回去。
He raised his hand and shoved me hard. Caught completely off guard. I stumbled backward, my back crashing heavily against the carriage shaft. The excruciating pain made me gasp for air. "You wicked, malicious woman." Xiao Jinian pointed right in my face, while tightly holding Sienna in his arms. Today is the grand wedding day of myself and Sienna. Must you see blood spilled to be satisfied? Nanny's son is Sienna's wet nurse. How dare you attack her with a golden hairpin? You are nothing but a vulgar street shrew. Guards! Call the imperial physician! Quickly, stop the bleeding for Nanny's son! He roared anxiously, while gently patting Yu Jinsing's back to comfort her. I held onto the carriage shaft to steady myself, staring at this man I had loved for 7 long years. My hair had come undone from pulling out the hairpin just now, with a few loose strands draped over the side of my face. In his heart, my dignity wasn't worth even a single finger of that wretched servant. Repeating those 4 words, vulgar street shrew, I suddenly burst into laughter. The laughter grew louder and louder, carrying an endless, heartbreaking sorrow. Sharvin Kyun, you actually pushed your wedded wife for the sake of a mere servant? Shut up. Since you have already signed the letter of divorce, you are no longer my wife. Shai Jinghim seemed utterly infuriated by my laughter. If it weren't for the sake of the Chen family, I would charge you with attempted murder right this instant. How grand. No longer your wife. I wiped the smile from my face. Since that is the case, then I shall sever everything between us, clean and absolute. Before the words even faded, I suddenly spun around with lightning speed and snatched the saber from the guard's waist beside me. A cold blade flashed instantly, humming with a sharp metallic ring. What do you think you're doing?
小景很费神扛霹雳陪又不是脚。
He instinctively shielded Yoon Jin-sen with his own body. I gripped the hilt backward and grabbed a handful of my falling hair with my other hand.
小景上 ，the empire you want 要靠这里火。
The Empress throne you wanted, I have vacated it for you. Today, I, Chen Wanlian, stand here and cut my hair as a sacred vow. I raised my hand and swung the blade. A lock of pitch-black hair drifted down, landing softly onto the snowy ground stained with mud and blood. My body, my hair, and my skin are sacred gifts from my parents. By cutting my hair today, all our bonds of love and duty are forever severed. From this moment on, whether you marry or I wed, we have absolutely nothing to do with each other. In this life, and every lifetime to come, we shall never meet again. After saying my piece, I threw down the knife in my hand and didn't spare him another glance. I turned around and bent down, using my sleeve to gently wipe away the blood from the corner of Aunt Yoon's mouth. Mun, let's go home. I helped Aunt Yoon onto the carriage. Wan Lian. He took a step forward, completely on instinct. Your Majesty, Yunjin cried, grabbing his sleeve. She was weeping, looking like a delicate flower drenched in rain. Moore has fainted. Why isn't the royal physician here yet? My stomach hurts so much. Jia Jingham froze in his tracks. He looked back, but in the end, his steps were halted by Yunin's heart-crunching cries. Miss, Aunt Yoon leaned against the soft cushions, half of her face frightfully swollen. Are we Really? Out? I took out the ointment I carried with me, gently applying it to her wounds, bit by bit. Yes, we're out. From now on, there is no empress.
Only Chen Wanian.
Only the Chen family. We journeyed all the way south. Half a month later, the carriage stopped at the Jiang'an ferry crossing. The Chen family was already the wealthiest in Jinan, and after leaving the capital, I made no effort to hide my return. As the grand ship docked, the pier was already packed with a dense crowd. Cumbles, Fums from the clan, citizens, and hundreds of our old family servants. Everyone had come. There was none of the finger-pointing I had feared,
Nor any of the disdain usually shown to a deposed empress.
My eldest uncle, with hair as white as silver, sat at the very front, leaning on his cane. The moment he saw me step off the boat, tears streamed down his face. It's good to have you back. It's so good to have you home. He walked forward with trembling steps.
Eldest uncle, Wan Lian has brought shame upon the Chen family.
Nonsense! Eldest uncle struck his cane heavily against the ground, his voice full of absolute authority. The daughters of our Chen family are precious phoenixes, raised with the utmost care and nobility. It is the royal family that lacks the fortune to have you, and it is Ya Jihan who is blind. Our Chen family can easily support you, even if we have to cherish you for the rest of your life. We will never swallow that humiliation again. That's right. I returned home, treated like a queen, showered with love and adoration by everyone. I was welcomed back to the Chen family's ancestral estate by the riverside. Shedding the heavy phoenix robe, I changed into a dress made of the finest, most delicate Ruanian silk, embroidered with exquisite Jiaonan stitching. Once again, I was the proud, untamed, and dazzling eldest daughter of the Chen family. But as they say, the tree craves peace, but the wind just won't stop blowing. I had only been home for a few days when trouble found me while I was inspecting one of our family's shops. A few local thugs, clearly sent by our business rivals, were intentionally stirring up trouble in the store.
Oh? So this is the deposed empress the emperor kicked out of the palace, huh?
The leader of the thugs sneered. A filthy, lecherous grin plastered across his face. His eyes swept up and down my body, completely shameless. I heard you used to serve the emperor in his bed. That must have been quite a treat, wasn't it? Now that you've been abandoned, why don't you follow me instead? Your big bro here might not have a throne, but when it comes to raw strength... Slam. I crashed the abacus in my hand onto the counter, staring coldly at his filthy mouth. Just as my family guards were about to step forward, a flash of cold, gleaming steel suddenly ripped through the air. Ah! Before the thug could even blink, he was sent flying backward, crashing violently against the opposite wall. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, only to find a long sword, still in its scabbard, pressed firmly against his throat. Who gave you the dog's courage to speak such filth in her presence? Stunned, I looked up and saw a silhouette standing against the light at the entrance. He was exceptionally tall, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, clad in a dark midnight blue silk robe. At his waist hung a mutton-fat jade pendant of the absolute finest quality. Someone in the crowd gasped, recognizing him instantly. It's Seik Lulan, the heir of Prince Jenan and the great general of Weiwan, Silinan, the legendary warrior who achieved fame in his youth to defending the southern borders for 10 long years. The living Yama, whose very name struck terror into the hearts of our enemies. What on earth was he doing here? Silinan didn't even spare a glance at the piece of trash on the floor. Instead, he turned around and strode right up to me. Wan Lian. As he spoke my name, his voice trembled ever so slightly. He reached into his robe, pulled out a neatly folded handkerchief, and held it out to me. The handkerchief was so old that its edges were completely frayed, but on it was a crookedly embroidered lotus flower. This was the keepsake I gave to a boy who was being bullied in the stables when I went to the border with my father at 10 years old. I was stunned. Silegon looked at me, a blush creeping up to his ears. The war was won, the border pacified, and he was back. Although Zilingan was an iron-blooded general commanding 3 armies in front of me, he was nothing but a clumsy, lovesick boy experiencing his first love. Knowing how much I loved the sweet milk curd from Zhang's in the south of the city, this grand, noble heir actually went to stand in line himself. That day, I had just gotten out of bed and finished washing up when I saw him rushing into the courtyard, calling out, "Wanning! Quick, eat it while it's hot." I kept it tucked inside my robe to keep it warm. It hasn't cooled down one bit. The owner said this milk curd would taste gamey if it got cold and wouldn't taste good. I took the sweet milk curd, which still carried his body warmth, and opened the lid. A steaming, milky rema drifted out. I felt a sudden lump in my throat. During my 5 years in the palace, every single reward Jia Yingsen bestowed upon me was priceless. Yet, they were all so cold. Even the imperial meal sent to my quarters usually had barely any warmth left. No one had ever, just for a bite of food for me, run across half the city and kept it warm with their own body heat. I scooped up a spoonful and put it in my mouth. It was sweet but not cloying, and a sweet warmth flowed down my throat and straight into my heart. "Is it good?" Xilingan asked nervously. I looked up and gave him a bright smile. This is the best milk curd I have ever tasted.
Xilian's face flushed red instantly.
Stretching the back of his head and smiling like a child who had just been given a piece of candy. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in the Imperial Palace, it was a completely different scene. Today, Yoon Jingsen had deliberately changed into a moon-white, flowing cloud skirt and wore only a simple white jade hairpin in her hair. She had spent a fortune to find this out, learning that the emperor loved the former empress most when she was dressed in such simple, elegant attire. His Majesty has arrived.
Sha Zhenxing walked in with long strides. Yoon Jingsen rose immediately, curtsying gracefully, just as I used to do.
Your servant greets your Majesty, wishing your Majesty peace and health.
等我们与约进京稍后，
His footsteps abruptly ground to a halt. His gaze fell upon her moon-white skirt. His brow furrowed deeply in sheer disgust. On Sen Wanyan, this dress made her look like a pure, ethereal goddess descended from the heavens. But on Yoon Jingsen, it looked like a cheap pheasant trying to dress up in crane feathers. It just looked completely ridiculous, no matter how he looked at it. This dress doesn't suit you at all. Shai Jingxing talked to his collar, his irritation growing.
Yoon Jingsen's smile froze instantly on her face.
A flash of pure venom crossed her eyes, but she could only choke back her tears and reply meekly, "Yes, Your Majesty. I will keep." Desperate to ease the tension, she quickly guided Jia Yingxing to sit down and began brewing tea for him herself. "Your Majesty, this is the Snow Peak Crisp tea I brewed especially for you. Please, have a taste." She was trying desperately to copy my tea brewing technique, but her clumsy movements gave her away. The moment Xia Jingjing lifted the cup and took a single sip, he spat it out instantly. A hot liquid scalded his tongue, leaving it completely numb. "Are you trying to burn me to death?"
霞将尽信石兰的替客，当上通土，绽放楼台。
You can't even handle a simple task like this. When Wanlian brewed tea, the temperature was always absolutely perfect. She never made careless mistakes like this.
Wanlian again.
It was always Wanlian. Yoon Jingsan dug her nails so hard into her palms, they almost snapped. Yet, she had no choice but to drop to her knees and beg for mercy. Sha Jingxing stared down at the weeping woman in front of him, and a wave of deep irritation washed over him. When Wanlian was still here, the Palace of Eternal Happiness was always his sanctuary, no matter of what he spoke of. She always understood him perfectly. Her intellect and wisdom rivaled any man's. But now, I still have official memorials to review.
Get some rest.
Unable to bear staying there for another second, Ya Jingxing swung his sleeves and stormed out. As if guided by some unseen force, he found himself walking toward the Palace of Eternal Happiness. He pushed open the heavy doors and stepped inside. A thin layer of dust had settled over the quiet hall. He walked over to the familiar rosewood writing desk, the exact spot where Wanlian used to sit. He began rummaging through the depths of the drawers, desperately searching for any trace she might have left behind. Suddenly, a yellowed old ledger came into his view. On it, written in neat, elegant script, were lines of care. Jingsen has a stomach ailment. He must drink warm porridge when he wakes up and avoid raw or cold food. Jingsen has been having many dreams lately. Before sleep, the soothing incense in his room must not be too strong. Jingxing's old knee injury flares up in winter. He needs custom-made rabbit fur knee pads. Every single word was a testament to her deep love for him over the past 7 years. These words felt like a series of stinging slaps, landing brutally on his face. He realized that he hadn't just lost an empress, but the only person in this entire world who had loved him with all her heart and soul. Just 3 months after Yoon Jingxian was crowned empress with infinite glory, and during the very time the highly anticipated, auspicious child in her belly was growing the fastest, a disaster not seen in 100 years struck. An exceptionally rare, catastrophic flood swept through the 3 wealthiest provinces of both Jiangnan and Jiangbei with unstoppable force. Days of relentless torrential rain caused the dams to collapse completely. The floodwaters swallowed countless villages and cities like a raging beast. Millions of acres of fertile farmland were submerged, turning into a vast, endless ocean. Hundreds of thousands of commoners were left homeless, their families torn apart, displaced and destitute. Starving bodies littered the fields. Cries of grief echoed everywhere. The sheer scale of the tragedy was unprecedented since the founding of Great Lang. 800-mile urgent military dispatches flew into the imperial capital like a blizzard of snowflakes. The entire imperial court was instantly shaken. Panic spread like wildfire among the people. Before this, the director of the Astronomical Bureau had confidently declared in front of all civil and military officials that the new empress possessed a peerless, auspicious destiny, one that would surely guarantee favorable weather and prosperity for Great Liao and secure a century of rising national fortune. Now, in the face of this monstrous flood, those grand prophecies had become a massive, agonizingly ironic joke. Rumors spread rapidly among the common folk. In taverns and tea houses, people whispered in hushed tones, saying that the deposed empress, Shen Wanyi, was unparalleled in her virtue. Yet she was driven out of the imperial palace on completely fabricated charges. She has suffered a monumental injustice. This massive flood is because the heavens are enraged. This is a divine punishment sent by God. Some bold citizens even went as far as pasting notices right at the city gates, shouting, How is this current empress, Yoon Jinxian, any kind of blessing? She's nothing but a harbinger of doom, a cursed witch. The moment she took the throne, Great Lion was struck by this catastrophe.
If we don't oppose this evil queen, Great Grand will sooner or later be destroyed by her hands.
Naturally, these vicious rumors eventually reached the depths of the inner palace. Inside Weiyang Palace, the atmosphere plunged to sub-zero temperatures. Yoon Jinxian, like a madwoman, was hysterically smashing everything in sight. Priceless Ruware porcelain vases,
Imperial red coral centerpieces,
and exquisite blue and white pear-shaped vases, hurling them all onto the floor, shattering them into millions of tiny pieces.
Shut up! All of you, shut your mouths!
Her hair was a disheveled mess, and she roared, her face contorted in a hideous rage. Her nails had split from clenching her fists too hard. If anyone dares to whisper behind my back again and call me a curse, I will immediately order their tongue lipped out and have them chopped up to feed the dogs. Several personal maids knelt on the floor, which was littered with broken porcelain, trembling in absolute terror. They didn't even dare to breathe. The sharp shards had cut deep gashes into their knees and palms, and blood was staining their palace skirts. Yet they didn't dare to flinch even a single millimeter.
Mamasu dragged her ruined right hand, the one I had crippled with a gold hairpin,
which was now wrapped tightly in thick layers of bandages, and quickly dismissed all the maids. She hurried forward, completely ignoring the chaotic mess on the floor,
and anxiously pleaded in a hushed voice.
"Your Highness, my dear Highness, please, calm your anger. Be careful not to harm the baby."
She gently pulled Yoon Jinxian down to seek.
Pour her a cup of warm water, comforted her, saying, "Your Highness, don't panic. These rumors spreading among the commoners are only temporary. They won't amount to anything. As long as His Majesty still believes in your blessed destiny, our position in the palace remains as solid as a mountain. Have you forgotten the director of the Imperial Observatory? Our Yoon family spent a fortune and bribed him with 2 whole chests of gold bars. Besides, we still hold dirt on him,
so he would never dare to speak out of turn.
But His Majesty hasn't even come to see me lately. He hasn't stepped a single foot over the threshold of Weiyang Palace."
Yoon Jinxian slapped the teacup right out of Mama Su's hand.
Drifting in sheer despair and fury, she tightly gripped Mama Su's sleeve. Where was even a trace of the delicate, gentle lady she usually pretended to be in front of outsiders?
Her entire being was consumed by sheer malice and rage.
This is all San Huanian's fault, that miserable Kinks. Even after being kicked out of the palace, her ghost still haunts this imperial city to ruin me. If I had known she would be such a massive threat, on the very day she left the palace, I should have sent assassins to ambush and slaughter her on the road, making sure she died outside the palace walls once and for all. Shh.
Your Highness, watch your words.
Talk of such treason. If it ever reaches His Majesty's ears, it will cost us our heads. Manny Su's face drained of all color in sheer terror. She lunged forward, desperately covering Yoon Jinxian's mouth. She cast a paranoid glance outside the palace doors. What is there to fear? Yoon Jinxian snarled, violently shoving her aside. Her eyes burned with pure malice and madness. "This is Weiyang Palace. This is my territory, and there are no outsiders here. What absolute bullshit about being destined by heaven. What absolute nonsense about being the nation's lucky charm. Everyone in this palace knows the truth. It was all just a lie my family bought, paving my way to the top with mountains of cold hard cash. Blinded by jealousy and consumed by fear, she had completely lost her mind. Gnashing her teeth, she began plotting an even more sinister scheme. I am the rightful empress of the Long Dynasty. Now, if all else fails, I'll have my father forge evidence of treason or rebellion. I'll issue an imperial decree to raid the Chen family of Jianan. I'll seize the Julon token from that pitch Chen Huanian and drag 100 years of the Chen family's wealth straight into my private treasury. Once I have all that gold, let's see if His Majesty still cares about that penniless whore." A deafening crash shattered Yoon Jinxian's wild delusions. The massive screen standing at the entrance of the inner hall, thanking from premium rosewood and exquisitely carved, with 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix, was violently kicked down from the outside with a force like a thunderbolt. The heavy rosewood screen crashed onto the floor, shattering the stone tiles beneath it. A cloud of choking dust exploded into the air. As the dust settled, Zhao Xingxing stood there, his face pale with fury, looking like a demon stepping out of the depths of hell. He loomed at the entrance, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Driven by absolute rage and shock, his entire body trembled uncontrollably. His bloodshot eyes locked onto Yoon Jinxian, who was sitting frozen on her couch. His gaze burned with a terrifying, murderous fury. The moment Yoon Jinxian and Nanny Su looked up and saw him, their souls practically leaped out of their bodies in sheer terror. Their legs gave out instantly, as if all their bones had turned to dust. They collapsed in a heap, falling right onto the sharp, broken porcelain on the floor.
萧江秦信是鹤，我是神饼。
What had he just heard? Standing right outside those doors, he had heard every single word of this wicked woman's horrific scheme. For the sake of a so-called 100-year destiny of his empire, and for that absurd legend of a woman who could shed blue tears, He willingly branded himself a heartless, ungrateful bastard. With his own hands, he cast out his devoted wife of 7 years, the woman who managed his empire and shielded him from every blade and arrow. But it was all a lie. The mandate of heaven, the prophecy of auspicious fate from the Imperial Observatory. It was all fake. He suddenly remembered when his wife had those tragic miscarriages, and the Empress Dowager brought in those sham monks to perform rituals, claiming with absolute certainty that Chen Wanlian's horoscope was cursed, and that she would doom her husband, kill her children, and ruin the royal dynasty. What a load of absolute garbage. It was all a sick, twisted game played by the venomous Yun family and the Empress Dowager.
The whole thing was a calculated, colossal conspiracy.
And he, the almighty Emperor of Lyon, prided himself on being so wise and brilliant, had been played like a brainless fool in the hands of these vicious women. For a pathetic lie, he had destroyed his own home and chased away the only person in this world who truly loved him without wanting his throne.
Your Majesty, spare me!
Your Majesty, please, let me explain. It's not what you heard.
Yun Jingxin's face turned white as a ghost.
Ignoring the sharp porcelain shards slicing into her knees, he scrambled forward, desperate to grab Xiao Jingxing's legs and beg for mercy.
Get lost! Don't you dare touch me with your filthy hands!
Looking at her fake, deceitful face, Xiao Jingxin felt a wave of intense disgust wash over him. He raised his foot
With full force.
and kicked Yun Jixin square in the chest with zero mercy,
Yu Jixin flew back like a rag doll.
soaring through the air before crashing and rolling several meters away. Her back slammed hard against the solid rosewood table leg. Releasing a sickening, bone-cracking thud, she let out a piercing shriek, sipping up a huge mouthful of blood that stained her pale white dress.
For the sake of your family's greed?
For a shot at the Empress's throne. You dared to conspire with the observatory and deceive your emperor.
You dared to gamble with the destiny of my empire.
And treat my entire kingdom like a joke.
萧奖金线旁的杀手是废方不脸，各责的给这天悔教。
He felt a sharp, tearing pain in his chest. His throat tightened, and the metallic taste of blood rushed to his mouth.
Suddenly, he bent double
And vomited a massive spray of blood. In that exact moment, memories of the day Wanlian left the palace flashed uncontrollably in his mind. She was dressed in plain, simple white, and without a single regret. She drew a long blade and sliced through her flowing black hair. The way she looked at him one last time, there was no hatred in her eyes,
No begging.
only a chilling clarity that saw through it all. It was a cold, lifeless void, filled with raw, undisguised mockery. It turned out that she, a woman so brilliant, had seen right through this entire conspiracy from the very start.
She saw through his stupidity and saw right through his hypocrisy and selfishness.
Back then, she had just watched coldly as he danced like a fool, making a complete mockery of himself over a lie.
In her heart, she must have found him so utterly ridiculous and so incredibly disgusting. Your Majesty!
Hearing the commotion, the chief eunuch rushed inside, only to pale at the sight.
He was terrified out of his wits
And scrambled forward to support him. But Xiansing shoved the yukakoi, stumbling back 2 steps. He grabbed onto the doorframe with a death grip, barely keeping his swearing body from collapsing to the floor.
gasping heavily for air. He pointed his blood-stained finger at the ground.
Glaring down at the half-dead Yun Jingxian as he delivered his coldest decree. Hear my imperial decree.
Yun Jingxin has committed treason and deceived the crown. She has brought chaos to the inner palace. Her crimes are absolutely unforgivable.
Strip her of her empress title, her golden seal, and her imperial registry immediately. Demote her to a commoner and banish her to the cold palace.
Without my direct written order, no one is allowed to visit her. Leave her there to rot and die.
And as for this wretched creature,
This scheming, wicked old servant who pulled the strings.
he cast a freezing glare at Nanny Sue, who was lying paralyzed and shivering nearby, as if looking at a worthless insect.
Drag her out and beat her to death with clubs. Right now!
Then throw her corpse into the mouth crave to feed the dogs.
And then Xiao Jixin took a deep,
Ragged breath wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth.
and with a look of near-mad obsession in his eyes, he roared, "Summon the Imperial Guard Commander and the head of the Shadow Guards to my presence immediately! Find her! Find her at all costs!
Even if you have to turn the entire Daliang Empire upside down.
You must find my Empress and bring her back! Bring Wandian back to me, safe and sound!"
The entire palace plunged into an unprecedented state of panic. Trembling under the Emperor's thunderous rage, the servants walked on their tiptoes, terrified of triggering his wrath.
After issuing the decree,
Jingxing acted like a complete madman who had lost his mind. Like a wandering ghost, he searched through Weiyang Palace and Changle Palace, tearing everything apart.
he desperately tried to find even the tiniest trace that Wanlian might have left behind.
But there was nothing. Wanlinia had erased herself completely,
As if she had never even existed in this palace.
on the absolute edge of despair and collapse,
He cast aside all filial respect.
and forced his way into the Empress Dowager's signing palace. leading a squad of heavily armed imperial guards, facing her son, whose eyes were bloodshot and who looked like a vengeful spirit, and his hoarse, furious demands. The Empress Dowager tried to put on airs and deny everything, but when Xiu Yingxing slammed the confession of the Imperial Bureau's director right in front of her face, her eyes flickered with guilt. Her defenses crumbled completely, and she sank back into her phoenix chair, forced to admit the truth. It turned out that to secure her absolute control over the harem, and to push her own niece, Yun Jingxin, into power, and most of all, to use imperial power to seize the Zan family's immense wealth, a fortune so vast it put the national treasury to shame. She had not only condoned her family's treasonous deception, but had actively fueled the conspiracy from behind the scenes, paving the way for them at every turn. My emperor, everything I did was for your own good. Tears streamed down the Empress Dowager's aging face as she tried to hide her greed behind the guise of maternal love. Besides, Sangwani has no heir. If we had let her remain the empress, her family would have eventually become a threat to the throne. But Jingxin is one of our own. If she gives birth to the crown prince, only then will this empire forever remain in the hands of the Zhou family. For my sake? What a beautiful excuse. For my sake. Xia Jingxin looked at the white-haired, wrinkle-faced, yet still deeply scheming mother standing before him. His smile looked 100 times more tragic than crying. Mother. Stop lying to yourself. How could you possibly claim this was for my own good? You clearly did this to satisfy your own obsession with power and control, to satisfy the insatiable greed for wealth and glory of your precious Yun family. Pointing right in the Empress Dowager's face, he spat out every single word with bitter fury. Because of your insatiable greed, you personally destroyed your own son's family and crushed the only piece of true love he ever had in this life. From this day on, you can cling to your precious power and rot in this cold, empty tiling palace until the day you die. With that, he stumbled blindly out of the palace gates. Outside, a torrential downpour had already begun to crash down. Wild winds howled, sweeping up a storm of fallen leaves. Thunder roared and lightning ripped across the sky, as if the heavens themselves were collapsing. Xia Xinghao refused to let any eunuch hold an umbrella for him, and banned his guards from following him. Wandering like a living corpse, he let the icy rain mercilessly drench the imperial dragon robe that symbolized his supreme, absolute power. Unknowingly, as if guided by some deep, lingering obsession, he found himself standing before the gates of the imperial ancestral temple. He pushed open the heavy, crimson lacquer doors. The interior was drafty, cold, and pitch black. It was 7 years ago, on the night of the winter solstice. Because his mother was of lowly birth, he was framed by his own brothers, and the late emperor punished him, forcing him to kneel outside this temple, right in the snow and jagged ice, for 3 days and 3 nights, without a single drop of water or crumb of food. His entire body was covered in severe frostbite. His fever raged uncontrollably, and his mind began to slip away. He genuinely believed that, as an unfavored prince, he would die a silent, frozen death in this ruthless, bone-crushing palace. Just as he closed his eyes in absolute despair, ready to welcome death, Chen Wanian appeared. She was just a silly, brave-to-a-fault girl who had only recently come of age. She used her only pieces of jewelry to bribe the guards, risking execution, to sneak into the imperial temple in the dead of night. She pulled a steaming meat bun, still warm from her own body heat, out from her robe and forced it into his frozen hands. Casting aside all rules of propriety between men and women, she unbuttoned her thick fur cloak and wrapped him tightly inside it. Sobbing uncontrollably, she desperately rubbed his purple, numb, frozen hands with her warm, tiny palms, crying out, "Jinghao, don't be scared! Eat something, please. You'll have the strength to hold on if you eat. I'm right here with you. I won't let you die." That vow was like a warm sun in the dead of winter. Every single word deeply heartfelt, forever burning itself into the very depths of his soul. To be bound as husband and wife, loving each other with absolute trust. Once I rule the world, I will never let you down. That was the promise he once made her. But what about now? The ancestral temple stands as solemn and majestic as ever. The spirit tablets of his ancestors still sit high on the altar, cold and lifeless. Yet, he has personally driven away the very girl who was once willing to die by his side. With a heavy thud, he fell heavily to his knees on the cold, golden-tiled floor of the temple. With trembling hands, he reached into his robes and pulled out a carefully wrapped bundle. Inside was the lock of severed hair that I had carelessly tossed into the snow at the palace gates that day. He clutched the severed hair tightly against his chest, sucking uncontrollably before the tablets of his ancestors like a lost child. His cries were agonizing, filled with heartbreak and despair. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, just come back to me, okay? He begged, kowtowing heavily over and over to the empty hall as thunder rumbled overhead. But no matter how hard he slammed his head against the ground, and no matter how desperately he wept, there was no longer that girl who would worry about him, and gently pull him up. Who would stuff a warm bun into his mouth or hold his hands to warm them up? That bright, beautiful girl was never coming back. The only response he received was the howling wind and ruthless rain raging outside, and the suffocating silence of the empty hall. Just then, the dark figure materialized in the hall, silent as a ghost, and dropped to one knee. It was the chief of the Shadow Guards, whom he had sent to Jiang'an to track her down. Yeah, Our Majesty. The chief's voice trembled with hesitation and fear. He kept his head bowed low. The moment Xiao Jingxing heard him, he whipped his head around. Ignoring the blood dripping from his forehead, he stumbled forward frantically, like a drowning man clawing at his last lifeline. He grabbed the Shadow Guard by the shoulders, shaking him violently. Did you find her?
Tell me quickly, where is she?
Is she doing well? Is she still angry with me? Is she waiting in Jiangnan for me to go and bring her back? The chief felt like his bones were about to shatter from the violent shaking. He didn't dare look into the eyes of this now half-mad emperor. He gritted his teeth and braced himself to report truthfully. Your Majesty, we have found the deposed Empress Chen. She is currently living at the Chen family's ancestral estate in Jiangnan. She hasn't suffered at all. In fact, she has thrived. She now controls all the Chen family's businesses, commanding immense influence throughout Jiangnan. The businesses are incredibly prosperous. Hearing that she wasn't suffering, a heavy weight was finally lifted from Xia Jingxing's heart. He asked eagerly, "Did she mention me? Did she say anything about returning to the capital?" Cold sweat broke out on the Shadow Guard's forehead. His voice dropped to a whisper. It's just, my lord. My scouts have found that Lady Chen is now constantly accompanied by a tall, well-built man. According to several reports from our spies, that man appears to be Zai Linan, the heir of the Prince of Jiannan and the great general of Weiwan, who has just returned victorious from the southern border. The two of them go everywhere together, practically inseparable. They've been seen acting extremely intimate on the streets of Jiangnan. The word intimate was like a pair of poison-ticked daggers, plunging ruthlessly and mercilessly straight into Zhao Jingying's heart. He stood there, completely struck by lightning, frozen in utter shock. His mind uncontrollably flashed to memories of her, the woman who had always been so gentle and submissive in his presence, who had always looked at him with eyes full of pure adoration and love. She was always so traditional, so dignified. How could she smile so radiantly at another man? How could she shower another man with warmth and affection? How could she be so intimate with someone else? In an instant, a poisonous fire called jealousy erupted like a volcano, utterly devouring whatever sanity he had left. She was his wife, the woman he had officially wed, who had stood by his side for 7 years and helped him conquer this entire empire. She belonged to him, and him alone. How could she just turn around and love someone else? How could she? Ready the horses. Prepare the horses immediately.
小镇定星90里烧的稀客港乐赛。
His eyes were bloodshot, burning with rage, letting out a bone-chilling roar like an enraged, cornered beast. Order the Imperial Guard to assemble 1,000 of their elite. I'm due you. I'm going south to Jiangnan immediately. He unsheathed the imperial sword at his waist and hacked it violently into the pillar of the ancestral temple. Wood splinters exploded everywhere as a manic, murderous rage flared in his eyes. She is my empress. In life, she belongs to me. In death, she is my ghost. Anyone who dares lay a finger on my woman, I will slaughter them. I will execute their entire family line. Meanwhile, the Galai sun in Jiangnan was blazing like wildfire. Yet, inside the backyard of the old Xing estate, it was remarkably peaceful and cool. A century-old wisteria cascaded from its trellis like a massive purple waterfall. Dappled sunlight filtering through the gaps in the leaves, casting shifting shadows on the ground, and perfectly shielding the courtyard from the harsh afternoon heat. As a gentle breeze swept through, the sweet scent of wisteria drifted through the air. I was reclining lazily on a rattan chair lined with a cool bamboo mat, holding a suya embroidery hoop that I had just started on. With my head bowed, I focused on stitching a lifelike butterfly pattern with vibrant silk threads. Beside me, Seely Bone was dressed in a comfortable, cool silk tunic. He pulled up a small wooden stool and sat astride it, sitting right next to me. In his hands, he held a delicate white jade bowl. Inside were fresh, sweet tangerines that had just been chilled in cold well water. His slender, well-defined hands were peeling a tangerine with incredible patience, even carefully using a bamboo toothpick to remove every single bit of the white pit, terrified that even a hint of bitterness would ruin the taste. Once he had peeled half of it, he gently held the glistening, translucent pulp and brought it to my lips. I paused my embroidery and looked up into his deep, smiling eyes. I gave him a tender smile, without a hint of shyness, and naturally opened my mouth to take the sweet fruit. The cool, sweet, and tangy juice instantly burst in my mouth, not only washing away the sweltering midsummer heat, but warming my very soul.
Qi Linan drew back his hand.
Watching my satisfied expression, with eyes so full of tender, overflowing love and adoration, On this peaceful afternoon, with someone beside me whose entire world revolved around me, and a gentle breeze blowing, I felt completely safe. This sense of peace, where I didn't have to be on guard or watch my every step, was something I never dared to dream of during my 5 years in Changle Palace.
Is it good?
He asked softly, Grace, his voice low and beautiful. It's very sweet, I replied, nodding. I set down my embroidery hoop,
Reached into the jade bowl to pick up the other half of the peeled tangerine.
Leaned forward.
and naturally held it up to his lips. You should try some too.
Shi Lingyan's face broke into a wide, bright smile.
Just as he opened his mouth to take it, in this warm, peaceful moment, the time itself seemed to stand still.
Bang! The heavy, red lacquered wooden gate of the backyard was violently kicked open from the outside, with destructive force.
The once sturdy door latch snapped cleanly in two. The wooden door slams violently against the wall, sending a deafening crash echoing through the room. Xiao Jingxing is dressed in plain clothes. He is covered in dust from his long journey. It fails to hide the raw, suffocating aura of a man born to rule. His hair is messy and disheveled, with a few sweaty strands plastered to his forehead. Deep in his eyes is a cold, ruthless gaze. His lips are cracked and dry, and he has clearly lost a massive amount of weight. I obviously hasn't slept or rested for days, riding day and night at a frantic pace, just to reach Jianan. Standing at the doorway like a wrathful god, he pants heavily, his bloodshot eyes glaring like a rabid wolf at my hand intertwined with Zhe On's, as we feed each other. He has never seen Sen Wanlian look so soft, playful, and completely at ease. In the imperial palace, she was always poised and dignified, holding a rigid, dutiful reverence for the emperor. But this kind of sweet intimacy, something reserved only for a loving husband and wife, this tender, romantic atmosphere that completely shuts him out, is slowly slicing his heart to pieces, like 1,000 agonizing cuts.
我依然小惊信龙儿
His voice terrifyingly hoarse. His eyes are bloodshot and wild, and he charges forward like a mad bull, reaching out to grab me.
Who dares trespass into my manor?
Xie Ling'an reacts instantly. Almost the exact second the door was kicked open. The very second Xia Yingxing shouted. He moves like an agile leopard, springing up from his stool. With a swift, protective slide of his towering frame, he shields me completely behind his broad back, leaving no room for threat. With a sharp, metallic ring like a dragon's cry, the soft sword Xie Ling'an always wears at his waist unsheathes half an inch, its icy blade reflecting a blinding, lethal gleam in the sunlight. A suffocating, almost tangible wave of murderous intent erupts from Xie Ling'an. Though Xie Ling'an is only wearing simple, casual clothes today, he is, after all, the living Yama, a ruthless general who crawled out of piles of corpses in the living hell of the southern border to command tens of thousands of troops. Once the iron-blooded, deadly aura he forged from countless life-and-death battles is unleashed, it instantly crushes Yao Jingxing's so-called imperial majesty.
Forced back by this terrifying, suffocating pressure, Xia Jingxing freezes, his breath catching in his throat.
But instantly, the sheer rage of being defied by a mere subject completely overpowers his fear. He flies into an even wilder rage.
谢新郎 how dare you
Xiao Jingxing points directly at Xie Ling'an's face, his eyes blazing with fury. An emperor's majesty is not to be defied. This is my woman. She is the empress of Dalian. And yet, you dare point your sword at me? Are you committing treason? Standing behind Xie Ling's broad, sturdy back, I could feel his tense muscles and his fiercely protective stance. A deep, unshakable sense of peace washed over me. Slowly, I peeked out from behind him. But the moment I saw the newcomer's face, a face that had once haunted my dreams, but now felt entirely, chillingly foreign, the warm, happy smile on my face instantly vanished like a receding tide. It faded completely, leaving me feeling as though I had plunged into an icy abyss. I spoke coldly. Sir, breaking into a private residence in broad daylight and spewing absolute nonsense the moment you open your mouth. Just what exactly are you trying to do? I looked at him, my voice flat and calm, as if I were addressing an unreasonable, raving madman. Xiao Xingxin stared back at me in complete disbelief, his eyes wide with shock, as if he didn't even recognize me anymore. As he met the dead, unbothered indifference in my eyes, his heart twisted in agony.
What's me? I'm chasing.
I am your husband. How can you look at me as if I'm your worst enemy? Are you still angry with me?
I was blinded by Yun Jingxin.
I know I was wrong. I've come to take you home, he pleaded, desperate to explain. He tried to push past Xie Ling'an, who blocked him like an iron tower, reaching out to grab my sleeve. But Xie Lang had no intention of letting him get anywhere near me. With a swift raise of his hand, he channeled his internal energy and slammed a ruthless, crushing palm strike directly into Xiao Jingxing's chest. Xie Ling'an's voice sounded as if it were forced. From between his gritted teeth, carrying a chilling warning, that strike of his was a brutal, battle-tested military palm technique, delivered with absolutely zero mercy.
Zhao Yingxing was already severely physically drained from days of exhaustion.
Relentless travel and sheer bodily collapse. Under the sheer force of the blow, he staggered back several steps, stunned him so hard he nearly collapsed in a humiliated heap on the muddy ground of the courtyard.
You dare push me, you treasonous rebel!
With his path blocked, and the searing pain in his chest,
Xiao Zhexing felt utterly humiliated in front of the woman he loved.
furious to the absolute limit, she yelled at the young master. I think you have the wrong person. I stepped out from behind Zhe Lingon and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. I tilted my chin up slightly,
My gaze calm and resolute.
Looking directly at Xia Jingheng's furious, twisted face, I slowly spoke,
pronouncing every single word with absolute clarity. My husband's name is Sai Lang Han. He is not far away, but right before your eyes. He is standing right here. Hearing this, Xia Jingheng trembled violently all over. It was as if he had been struck by a sudden bolt of lightning. He took a step back in sheer disbelief, his face instantly turning as pale as paper, completely drained of color. As for the Jingheng you speak of, Posh, the deeply mocking yet liberating smirk playing on my lips. Looking at his face, hollowed by despair, he has long been dead to me. Half a year ago, the moment that relinquishment agreement was signed, and when you all forced me to hand over the Julan order, the Jingheng died in my heart, once and for all. I took a deep breath, completely burying that rotten past. The grass on his grave is probably 3 feet high by now. Having said that, I didn't waste another second looking at his pained, twisted face. I turned around,
right in front of Xia Jingheng,
and casually picked up a slice of tangerine from the J bowl on the table. The one Sai Ling-an had just peeled and cleaned of all its white pith for me. I turned to look at Xi Ling-en, and, my eyes instantly softening into absolute tenderness, I stood on my tiptoes and gently fed the tangerine slice into his mouth, saying with a bright smile, "Husband, this tangerine is so sweet. You must try it." Xi Ling unobligingly lowered his head, caking the fruit from my fingertips, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed it. He arched an eyebrow, his intense eyes flashing with pure provocation, as if staking his claim. I cast a deep, lingering look at the thunderstruck Yao Jingheng standing nearby. I gently patted the back of Ziling's hand. I deliberately raised my voice and said pointedly, "When you're done eating, remember to spit the seeds far away." Our courtyard was just swept clean. We can't let the trash left by some filthy strays dirty our ground.
Chasha Sanside, watching us acting so deeply in love,
Hearing my thinly veiled insults
and those heart-wrenching words that cut him to the bone,
he felt the world spin around him. A painful whimper escaped his throat, as if all the blood had been drained from his body, driving him to the absolute depths of despair. But Ya Xingheng refused to give up. He was like a man possessed, waiting in the long, stone-paved alley outside the Chen family's ancestral home for 3 days and 3 nights. During those 3 days, the weather in Jianan was incredibly erratic. A torrential downpour began to fall. Violent winds whipped heavy raindrops, mercilessly pelting his body and stinging his skin. Abandoning all his imperial dignity, he knelt upright outside the tightly shut gates of the Chen mansion. Looking just like a homeless beggar, he let the icy storm wash over his frail body, again and again. Sousing his clothes completely, with his hair plastered to his scalp in a miserable state, the emperor who once sat high and mighty upon the imperial throne, deciding the lives of tens of thousands with a single word, was now reduced to begging in the dust under a cold autumn rain in Jianan. The passing locals, whether they were merchants holding oil, paper, umbrellas, or porters wearing straw raincoats, all pointed and whispered at this strange man kneeling before the grand estate. Oh my, where did this madman come from? What is he doing kneeling here in this heavy rain? I heard he's a heartless betrayer, begging the eldest miss of the Chen family for forgiveness. Skis, how devoted. He's been kneeling for 3 days and still hasn't left. They thought this was some touching drama of a prodigal son returning, completely unaware of the deep, blood-stained hatred that lay beneath. Only I, standing behind the attic window, watching that swaying figure in the heavy rain with cold indifference, knew the absolute truth. This wasn't some earth-shattering devotion. It was merely a dictator, used to controlling everything, acting out of resentment and possessiveness after losing his most reliable plaything. On the morning of the 4th day, the rain stopped, and Xi Lingnan and I prepared to set off to inspect our businesses in Jiangbei. But when we arrived at the docks, out of nowhere, Xiao Jingxing came rushing out. He blocked our path, crying out, "Wanlian, please don't go!" Right there, in front of the hundreds of commoners gathered at the docks. The great emperor of Great Lion threw all his dignity away and fell to his knees before me with a heavy thud. He desperately reached out, trying to grab the hem of my dress, but Zliling stepped in, blocking his hand. "Wanlian, please, come back with me." I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Xia Jingxing sobbed, tears and snot streaming down his face. He pleaded incoherently. "Yu Jingxin, I've already stripped her of her title. I've banished her to the cold palace. The throne of the empress is vacant. As long as you come back with me, you will still be my empress."
No.
From now on, I will empty the entire imperial harem.
I will only love you, and you alone. My empire, my kingdom.
Even the command of the 9 peaks. I'll give it all to you.
I'll give you everything.
I beg you, please don't abandon me. He humbly offered up the things he held most precious, desperately trying to earn just a single look back from me. The crowd around us erupted into gasps and whispers.
I just stared at him, quietly.
Looking at this man who had once sworn to protect me for the rest of his life, all I felt now was absolute disgust.
交两情性，唉，方里搜。
The boy I once loved was the one who would rather freeze to death in the snow just to keep my hands warm. But that boy died a long time ago, consumed by his lust for power. He died because of your hypocrisy and scheming. The man standing before me now is selfish, think, and utterly pathetic. You disgust me.
下教晋升本保百令了。
The very last speck of light in his eyes completely died out.
Your late-coming devotion is cheaper than dirt.
I spat out those words coldly.
Sealing on, I turned and called. He took a giant step forward, removing his cloak, and gently draped it over my shoulders, carefully tying the straps for me.
Let's go.
Husband, I said, slipping my arm through Zili Yan's without giving another glance to the kneeling Zhao Jingxing. I turned around and boarded the ship. The sails unfurled. The horns sounded a long, resonant note.
The massive ship sliced through the river, slowly drifting away from the shore,
leaving Sha Jingxing kneeling alone in the mud on the riverbank, watching that boat drift further and further away, watching my silhouette fade where the sky meets the water. He parted his lips, spitting out a mouthful of blood, yet he couldn't make a single sound. Then,
he finally understood.
Some goodbyes last a lifetime.
Once you lose someone, they are gone forever.
3 years later, Yun Jinxin went completely mad in the cold palace.
Day after day, she screamed that she was the empress,
until she finally fell into a dry well and died.
Meanwhile, consumed by grief, Jia Jinhang fell gravely ill.
Beyond the reach of any medicine or cure.
On a cold winter night with heavy snow falling,
he laid in Changle Palace, clutching a lock of my severed hair tightly in his hand, drawing his very last breath in endless remorse.
At the moment of his death, his eyes were still staring in the direction of Jianan.
At this moment, Jianan was shrouded in a gentle, misty rain. Life was peaceful and serene. From the Zin family courtyard came the sweet, tender voice of a child reading, "Lotus picking in Jianan. How lush and green the lotus leaves grow."
I cradled my babbling daughter in my arms,
teaching her how to recite the poem.
The courtyard gate was pushed open,
and Xilingen walked in, carrying 2 jars of freshly bought osmanduses wine
and a lively flopping perch.
My love, the fish is incredibly fresh today.
I'll make you some hot fish soup tonight as the sun set.
And cooking smoke curled gently from the chimneys.
There was someone to ask if my porridge was still warm,
and someone to stand by my side in the twilight. This is the peaceful life I always wanted.